my computer has no longer space. So exactly, thank you. If you can.
Yeah, I'll start recording. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much, Tommaso, for this nice introduction, and thank you everybody for being here. I'll be presenting research that's mainly conducted by my PhD student, Katharina Badenhausen, who has in the meantime moved to Mercedes-Benz, where she's in a leadership program. I had hoped for her to pursue an academic career. Many were interested in her angle on this complex topic, but she decided to go into business, which of course, you know, it's her future, her life, and she's enjoying that. Let me, as Tommaso and I discussed, I will give a little bit of background on who I am, because I saw a few people that I don't know. I'll present the paper in about 45 minutes. During this time, please feel free to just unmute yourself and ask questions. It can be interactive. I tend to overlook the chat for questions as I'm talking, so please just unmute yourself and feel free to jump in. Yeah, I need your help with this paper because it's not published, and I will follow a pull system there. So anything that you suggest, I can respond to. I have my notebook here, so I hope to get a lot of input there. The framing that Tommaso gave was perfect, and I will come back to that in a minute. Well, who am I? I have a bit of a background in more of a like social anthropology, political studies, state and society type of work. I studied Japanese. I lived in Japan for 3 years. I had the great pleasure of sharing lectures with Higashi-san, who is with us now. As I started out more in policy type of topics, developing world type of settings, I moved to economics and then did a PhD in operations management, which is where I still do most of my, at least my teaching now. I had the great pleasure of not being struck by anything that was a budget crunch or a pandemic, as current PhD students are facing. And I visited CRG in École Polytechnique. I also visited Jean-Paul McDuffie in Wharton, and I spent again some time in Tokyo, where I had also done my postgraduate research. I'm now associate professor at Erasmus University in the Department for Technology and Operations Management. I'm also a fellow at the Institute for Manufacturing at the University of Cambridge, where I cycled back to, somebody wants to be admitted. I think I am the host, I'll admit them. Back to more of the policy implications that I studied in my early career. Institute for Manufacturing has a very large, a part of it is called Engage. They have 30 staff who reach out to the public, but especially small and medium-sized enterprises wanting to digitize and how they can help with that. So that's a project I'm doing in Cambridge. I try to bring all this together under supply ecosystems as a topic, which includes digitization as a tool and a social as well as environmental outcomes, sustainability outcomes as a goal. So I try to see an ecosystem as an arena where both of these play a role to make the world a better place for everybody. Because I admitted someone, I can't click. Yes. What is essential to what I do is Gemba research. So I don't do any research where I can't actually go to the production line. So this is one of the episodes that I enjoyed most. And here I worked for 3 weeks at the production line of a Nissan forklift seat supplier. And this is a tier 2 supplier to Nissan. So wherever I have a chance, and if anyone has an opportunity, I like to go out, sit at the production line and understand what people's life in production looks like. My relationship with Gerpisa, the first conference I attended in 2005. And the funny thing is that I was educated in the Netherlands, never came across Gerpisa, and then went to University of Tokyo, where I was introduced to Gerpisa and joined the first conference, flying in from Tokyo to Paris instead of taking a train from Amsterdam to Paris. And my most recent GERPISA event was in Detroit last year, where I had the great pleasure of meeting Juan Sebastian and Lorenza for the first time. I am really appreciative of the opportunities that GERPISA has given me. One of the things, as a junior scholar, I was able to publish a chapter in one of their books that helped me a lot later, you know, try to profile myself as automotive scholar. And I also think that the broad net that GERPISA has been casting, it's been really liberal in the topics that it welcomes, has succeeded in attracting young talent. I'm currently in charge of PhD recruitment, and I'm realizing now how hard it is to get young people interested in important topics to choose for academia. So Tommaso should one day teach me how they do that, make sure that they stick to research, but you get all the people who look into topics that are urgent, important, that need to be solved, and that from a academic perspective. I really appreciate that, and so I'm very thankful for this opportunity also today to share some of the things I am doing. Yeah, so key strength, I think, inclusiveness. Really think that's great. Yeah, so what are the research themes in general that I have done? I looked at dismantling of the Nissan Keiretsu after the Nissan revival plan that was announced by the infamous Carlos Ghosn. And I mainly looked at tier 2 supplier impact. There's 2 papers there that I published on this that focus on a net benefit for the OEM. And this is something I try to move away from in the future, where I think a net benefit to a social or a climate goal is even more important. But as a junior, this wasn't easy for me to get published in journals that would be accepted for me to get a permanent contract. I am extending social sustainability, so mostly looked at employment conditions most of my career, now to climate change. I have no formal education in that space, so I need to self-educate I need to self-educate there. But that's a few of the other topics that I focus on. I recently guest edited a special issue at the Journal of Operations Management on climate change and economic inequality. It took about a year to convince the editors-in-chief at Journal of Operations Management that this should be limited to the mobility sector. They didn't think that relevant. So when I sent my proposal to do a special issue on climate change and economic inequality, they said, that's fine. You have to include all sectors, including fashion, whatever. I said, I don't know anything about these sectors. I would not be able to review these papers properly. And then they said, okay, but you will get very few papers. This was right. We got very few papers, but the papers we did get were all in transportation mobility. So I'm really happy with the results, that I have one issue that addresses sustainability topics in a sector that we all know has quite some peculiarities that are not necessarily generalizable to other sectors. As I mentioned, I try to broaden the scope to supply ecosystems where I see digitization to play an important role, and also a complementary role to supply chain visibility. Not everything absolutely can be substituted by a digital tool, but there's definitely a situation possible where digital tools can help support achieving social sustainability and climate sustainability goals. So what I present today is mainly Katharina's dissertation work. She did most of the field work, but as I will show later, I did field work myself at the same company. It's not necessarily included in this in this paper, but I'm familiar with this company as well. Right, if no one raises a hand or unmutes themselves and has a remark, then I will just continue. So again, feel free to interrupt. very broad, simple research question we started out with. So why are incumbent automotive firms so slow to adapt to challenges in propulsion and addressing climate change and digitization? So, I mean, as I don't need to tell you this, so legacy firms have a bit of a luxury position. It's hard to start mass production as a new entrant. Look at Tesla. So they could be a bit complacent. And consumers also prefer the known alternative in this field, status safety. But this is 10 years ago. And now our incumbents are being outcompeted by new entrants. This was something that 10 years ago, people would say, no, this is not possible. We're safe, we're fine. So Katharina decided to go a bit deeper in this, in this topic, like why it is so slow to adapt. I'm grabbing this slide. This is actually my last slide. As Thomas was talking, I pulled this slide forward because it links exactly to what Tommaso was saying. In our paper, we mentioned automotive 63 times, integral product architecture 48 times, modular product architecture 33 times, and design shift 41 times. We sent it to ASQ, which was a bit of a shot in the dark. We got good reviews, ultimately a reject, but none of these topics was mentioned in the review. So the reviewers completely missed to us the key components of our arguments. To us, this indicates that it is a specific field. Not every reviewer is ready for this, but we were quite surprised that it was not picked up at all while our argument revolves around it. Yeah, so then they said, you don't contribute to theory about absorptive capacity and learning. Well, I said, well, you totally missed our point. So yeah, probably you're right, but you also missed our point. So now we think maybe send it to organization science, where there's recent papers about product architecture. But again, I pulled this slide up. This is also my last slide, but because Tommaso was saying, yeah, exactly. It's not a topic that the journals, at least, that are appreciated in the school where I am, Erasmus University, they completely missed it. I mean, we structured the paper around it. It was completely missed. So that's why I'm very happy to be amongst friends here who can help me position this in a better way. Right. So we look at one of the largest and most successful tier 1 automotive suppliers based in Europe. I would say the name if this wasn't recorded. You can think who that supplier is, and glad to tell you in person, but not on recording. Very confident, visibly self-proclaimed digital leader. If you look at their website today, which I did just before this presentation, you would think they got this all sussed, absorbing new knowledge. We know how to do this. We're a legacy company, incumbent, traditional approach. Digitization comes along. We got this. We're the leader. But as we started to do our interviews, and most of what I will be sharing now in this presentation is some of the the actual quotes that our interviewees gave, for you also to help me make sense of that in a way that would resonate with getting this published somewhere. So one of the, and all of these, I didn't put the exact roles there because we had the VP of purchasing. We spoke to the digital lead. They have vice presidents for digital transformation, etc. These are all people in the space of digitization and product design. So they said we knew how to manufacture, we knew how to engineer, we knew how to build, but we did not know how to go from products to services, nor how to connect our products with each other, meaning digital tools. You all know this, you probably heard this too. So how do we make sense of the gap between their self-presentation as a digital leader and then the actual reality where they are lagging, afraid of the competition, afraid of being surpassed, not able to attract young talent, not able to move forward, and the public image that they have. So if we look a little bit at theoretical background, it's undisputed that a firm needs to learn to survive. That's research in the 80s and 90s that is already arguing this. Then, when there is a dominant design and it becomes obsolete, you need to identify, assimilate, utilize relevant new knowledge, and that becomes critical. This is also accepted. And then, yeah, this is a bit more technical, but the ability to absorb new knowledge relies on the intersect between existing knowledge and new knowledge. And this is, it sounds a bit counterintuitive, not to you guys, but in general, in modular design, the intersect is big, and in integral, it's small because it's so specific to a setting. And integral products, such as internal combustion engine, consist of interdependent components. You all know this, who have an underlying pattern of interactions. So we thought, okay, theoretical basis is there. Most of the components of what we're trying to argue has already been established starting in the 80s. So we thought that's easy sailing. Everybody's going to accept this story, but no, unfortunately not. So what did Katharina do? She did 48 semi-structured interviews. She did site visits, and this is from Brazil to China to Germany to Japan. She attended company conferences, workshops in the company. They have digital hubs that she attended, and basically was just hanging out, doing participant observation, and of course any company documentation that is available. This is data collection I did, doesn't necessarily feed into this paper, but just to give some background, I have a part-time PhD student, Jaime Caballero, who also studied the same company, actually worked for that company, and together with him, I also went to the tier 2 base that this tier 1 automotive supplier has in Mexico, and where they are digitizing production processes. So I can tell more about that if you are interested, but yeah, very different setting from what you may expect to find in Europe, but they're rolling out digitization of tier 2 suppliers in Mexico, and I was able to observe some of that. So 3 types of learning. I think most of you are familiar with these, but so it's established that companies need to learn to deal with change. So first, you would expect them to do some exploratory learning where they identify, recognize, and acquire new external knowledge. Transformative learning is where they assimilate and maintain the new external knowledge and the combination with the extant knowledge. Probably for automotive people, this is where the alarm bells start ringing, because this is where the challenge lies. And then exploitative learning is the application of the assimilated knowledge to new contexts. So this seems continuum. Modular to integral product architecture is often presented as a continuum, but I think we all know that this transformative, the middle bit, that's the hard bit for car makers, especially if you go into the supplier base, and especially if you also faced with quite urgent demands to change your propulsion technology, to change your climate impact, etc. So this is a contested area. Yeah, so we divided or not divided, from the data. Katharina learned that there's different phases to this learning that this company does. And they started, like even before the turn of the 20th century, this company already started. For over 100 years, they do exploitative learning under the dominant design of internal combustion engine. They're great at this. I mean, they're market leader. They're #1 in Fortune 500. Absolutely successful in learning under a dominant design. So some of the quotes that we had here was, "No one does it better. We are the best in the world. We are always going to be the best. And we all know how internal combustion engines work. That is what we do. And this is what we have been doing for a century." So they're confident in where they are until about 2010. Don't feel an urge to do any transformative learning, to look outside if anything else is happening. So everything happy and safe in the world of internal combustion. Now, the way they structure the business is according to business units. Funnily, so competition is often seen as something that brings out the best in people. You know, if you compete against someone, you work hard to make sure that you deliver. And what is happening in this company is business units are set up to compete with each other. So each business unit has a product portfolio, and then the units, they assign a weight to each product, and then rank them, and then rank the business units. So because they don't have a real competitor outside, they're safe within their dominant design. They're competing between the business units to, within their dominant design, with just incremental improvements, make sure that people perform to their best. And another funny quote was it was 9 business units. They're like a family of 9 siblings, so that's each competing to be their parents' favorite. So very internally looking company. If there's any questions, then yeah, I'll hear from you. Also, still in this phase, because it's a phase that's 100 years. Yeah, so what you also see is that because they're so internally focused, managers start finding what they call unconscious sabotage, where employees refuse to use and incorporate external knowledge because it doesn't fit the way they work. And it's seen as a contamination. Their technology is seen as pure, and anything that comes from outside is seen as contamination. I mean, you can feel that with this orientation, adapting to change is going to be very, very hard. So sabotage, contamination, and those, they feel pretty strongly in their pride for their technology. Yeah, and so even worse, you know, it feels like an embarrassment to go outside and have new technology implemented. And it feels like disclosing a weakness because you cannot solve it on your own. So definitely internally looking, exploitative learning up until like 2010. Questions about this first phase? I think it must be very, very familiar to people who are working with the OEMs. Any remarks here? Just looking around, scrolling through the pictures. Anyone question about this, or this looks like what you see with your incumbents, the incumbent firms that you know?
Now, we're just curious about the timing of the interviews, because this is after the Dieselgate, and to be so confident about the internal combustion engine, given also the fact that this company was involved in this. So how
it's incredible.
Have you seen some realization that this is going to be over very soon, or they were still dreaming of getting out of the mess somehow?
This is a perfect introduction to my next slide. Thank you, Tommaso. I was baffled by the self-confidence. This is absolutely, you know, I share the feeling. But then, you know, I have to, as a researcher, say, okay, this is apparently how they feel. This phase that's more than 100 years, you would expect to end with Dieselgate, but the trigger is where their customers start saying, we're going to stop production of ICE. It's a financial incentive that they feel. It's not, Dieselgate is mentioned, but the key remark is a customer saying, we're going to stop buying that. Yeah, so that's more than Dieselgate. That's the trigger to say like, oh, maybe we shouldn't be learning and innovating like this is customer orders dropping. And what they also mention is that India and China are very important markets for them, and demand is shifting even quicker there. So it's very a reaction to a changing demand that makes them shift. Interesting. Yeah, I thought so too. Yeah, so that's the key trigger. And then you get the hardest phase that they need to go through, and that's the transformative learning, where you know, as I mentioned, this intersect starts to hurt, where you're not quite fully modular yet. You're not quite, you're still quite integral. You're somewhere in between. They need to adopt this transformative learning to address the shift in dominant design that their customers is making. They're not even leading this transformation. This is the same quote I used before, but that's the key. That's the key quote where we saw that their knowledge is lacking, while presenting themselves as the strongest engineering firm that's ever existed on the planet. And also what surprised us as well is that managers said to us, we know that employees are not sharing their knowledge between the business unit. We just don't think it matters a lot, because we tell them what to do. We tell them how to innovate. They're good at this. They're not sharing knowledge. And, we didn't think that was a big deal. So really an interesting view on what knowledge is and how you learn. There's a new trigger where they start experimenting with new design features. And for the first time, we have a realization that their previous efforts are not sufficient. So they said, we're very conservative, process-oriented and rigid. We need to explore what is out there. We're too slow on our own. If you compare this to contamination, if you look outside, or embarrassment, if you look outside, you see that they start to understand that they're too slow and they need to go outside. Talking then about digitization, they said, IoT is not something you can do alone. We need a partner to improve faster, to learn faster. And it doesn't make sense to build all the competencies internally. This is, if you look at the difference between IT enabled and IoT and digital enabled, I think this is the key lies here, and that if you look at fast movers in the gig economy and in the new digital enabled economy, that's people who don't have all IT tools themselves. They just grab them from good providers, like their payments, their planning. They know which companies can offer that. They don't even understand the workings of the service that they input in their own product offering. They just trust the company to do that. So it's sort of also a new way of working in the space with suppliers. But this is not something where this company is heading at this moment. But they realize they can't do everything internally. Right. So phase 3 is still ongoing. So they need to learn how to, how do we need to come up with a new dominant design? And they're also not sure what the new dominant design will be. Do they need to completely move away from ICE? Do they need to move away completely from diesel? Is it only going to be electric? They're also sort of on the fence still on how to do this. So one of the, I think, revealing quotes here is, there is no inherent overlap between IoT and mechanical systems. And in fact, what helped us previously now hinders our progress. So a few decades ago, we split automotive division into business units, and we benefit from our knowledge about each system. And we now start connecting steering with brakes, with propulsion. This is only the start. We're hoping that by sharing problems, we gain new perspectives on how to approach these problems. So having to move away from their very siloed approach to a new approach where they need to actually talk to others, talk outside of the business units, and actually talk to other companies as well. So the sort of the conclusion of the interviews was there are 2 learning opportunities. It says one of these people that goes to a meeting on IoT, I go there because IoT is relevant, so I'm learning about it. And secondly, we have the same interest, so we are learning new ways of learning. So recognizing that their previous structure will not help them even survive in the next phase that is coming for automotive industry. Yeah, so information sharing is the part that has been missing in such an old company. We're trying to share knowledge that we have with our business units, in our business unit with our other business units, and yeah, this we're trying to promote. Oh, this is a bit rich. Let me first ask if there's questions about these interview quotes. Any ideas that come to mind?
Just if you can tell us a little bit of who you were talking to. I mean, are we talking about engineers with technical
I think you just,
or managers that are in charge of more kind of planning strategy? So what was the background of these people that?
Yeah, you just stepped away when I said that, and I didn't put it on put it on the slide. Yeah, so we have the VP for purchasing, we have a VP for like digital leads. So they have this whole huge, big new. It's not a business unit, but a layer that's digital leads. And so we talked to people horizontally in this digital effort, but also vertically. So even like the 20-year-old solution developer, algorithm writer, people in business hubs. So they have digital hubs that are not branded with their own brand name, just very small letters, like at the bottom of the door, you will see very small, like the name of this huge company, and they call them like digital platform or connextory, or, you know, very nice fancy name, where startups can come in and just work on their own stuff. Doesn't have to be an automotive solution, but then if there's an automotive solution, they're willing to buy or to license or to work with those firms. So Katharina spent quite some time in these digital hubs, just drinking coffee, talking to people, developing solutions, but also the old business leaders who had been in the companies for 30 years and who had grown from product development roles into management roles, but really strongly mechanical engineering backgrounds. And to their identity, also, that is what this company is. It's a strong mechanical engineering company. They don't see a company that can't do mechanical engineering. So you had a very broad spectrum of people. You know, one of the engineers, when I was in Mexico, one of the software engineers, we tried to bring to the line of the tier 2 supplier that we were visiting. This was a metal stamping company. They had a sensor installed to measure all types of measures that they didn't record before. We tried to bring the software engineer because he had designed the solution for that sensor. He just wasn't interested. He didn't even care this was automotive. You know, so there was a very broad spectrum of different types of people working in this organization, but also working quite disjointly. One of the things that I didn't include in this presentation here is that their tradition of instigating competition between business units, they also used in their transformative learning periods, where they had different localities develop similar solutions. So one of our interviewees was saying that they developed a solution in Mexico. They offered it to a supplier, and the supplier sort of jokingly said, your colleague in India is cheaper. Whereas the person in Mexico didn't even know somebody in India in the same company was developing a similar solution. So really using their old siloed structure also to not to learn together, but to compete in a very small group and then hope that, you know, somebody says Eureka and then has the perfect solution for everybody. Yeah, so a broad spectrum, but really people involved in purchasing, from purchasing to digitization. Yeah. Other questions at this point?
Now, if you just, so when you cite, if you can provide some background sometimes who is speaking, because I always find that interesting when you're in engineering.
Yeah, I didn't.
You have so many communities, a group of people, sometimes with divergent ideas about what should be done. And that could be my further questioning of your case study. And so if you could just, you know, because to contextualize what the person is saying, and I think that is, I'm sure you perfectly know that, and so that could be useful to put that in perspective. Who is talking?
Yeah, this is in the paper. The reason why I didn't put it here because some of the people, there's one of them, like there's one CEO, there's one digital lead. And because I know you know this company, but if I said, so I try to sort of protect some people, because we actually had a discussion with a couple of people asking them out of politeness, do you agree with this current version? And then they said, all of my quotes need to be gone. Like the respondent, they said, all of my quotes out. And then Katharina said, well, this is my dissertation, I'm defending in 2 weeks. You're going to amputate part of my work. And then we had to like tweak it. So that's why here I chose, because, and you know, this is recorded. It's in the paper, and in the paper it's more unclear who this company is. And yeah, so I appreciate the comments. You're right. To try to, I had the same in, you know, when I did my Nissan work, I talked to Carlos Ghosn. Yeah, there's one CEO. So that's really, you have to, that's the risk in doing a case study. You need to find the right way in pleasing everybody, which you're right, Tommaso, it is in the paper. Yeah, yeah. Especially embarrassment, sabotage, all of that, cut, basically. Yeah, unfortunately. Sorry, other questions? Anyone, other questions? No, don't seems to be. This is a very full slide. At first I tried to put it in 3 slides, so it didn't help a lot, but it's a summary of the of the phases that I talked about, where we summarized the different types of learning that was happening, some of the examples that was happening, and also to try to structure it as a process that a company goes through. So from exploitative learning with the consolidated dominant design to more transformative learning when there's shifts, and then transformative and exploratory learning when they really start to experiment with new features. And also let me stress here, so this is product change and process change, which also you in automotive know go hand in hand, but that's both of these changes that they try to elicit in their firm, and vastly underestimated how difficult this would be. Yeah, I'll just leave this up for a little bit if people want to look at it. I hope you have a bigger screen than I do. Yeah, environmental regulations is there, still not Dieselgate. It was external locus of control, the change, while publicly presenting themselves as a intrinsically driven leader, to be green, to be digital, to lead the pack in the new world for mobility. Yeah, so this is, I mean, I'll gladly share this afterwards. It's the 3 phases with the triggers in between that I talked about before. So yeah, we try to bring this all together by saying the dominance of an integral product architecture impacts your ability to learn. We don't say anything about a modular product architecture. We expect it's different, but we don't talk about it. So the argument revolves around the dominance of an integral product. And then based on this case, we think we can conclude that this integral design, it facilitates absorption under a dominant design if it's integral, but it impedes absorption when the dominant design shifts. So when there's a design shift and it's integral, then that is difficult. So there's different moving targets here, but I hope to get feedback from you on this, and also maybe missing links in the argumentation, or links that you see missing in the argumentation that that would strengthen this, or maybe you like flatly disagree. That's also fine. We can also talk about that. Yeah, I think so. This I pulled forward already. The argument is missed in the fields. You know, it's just not something that's that reviewers pick up on. Yeah, so maybe then I can open the floor to people's suggestions here, how to frame this better, and what missing links we have to include. Of course, you know, the paper is it's a pretty long paper. The presentation doesn't include everything, but maybe then yeah, your thoughts would be super welcome here, and how we make the story more interesting to a general public.
Oh, thank you very much, Merieke. I was still writing down some notes. And so let's open the discussion. Just a very quick reaction. I had the feeling that your conclusion here, I didn't see that coming in the previous presentation. I mean, all the argument about the fact that it's difficult and the fact that they were so much confident in such a way of dealing with things, so they have transformed their organizations and they have to look at knowledge aside. So it's a cultural problem, engineering culture, and also the problem of a company which is so hegemonic in its own field. Is like the only one who actually does has the control of certain technologies. It's not like car makers that have to look to competitors all the time. Here you have a company that in certain technological field is the world absolute leader, with presence all around the globe and in connection with all the OEMs. So basically you understand why they feel confident. Yeah. And then you suggest that the reason for that is the integral architecture, which takes away all the other elements of you know what we would just say, that is the world leader, that he has control of certain. So you say if it was a modular producer, that would be different. So it seems to me, just as a reaction to you asked suggestion about it seems to me that the conclusion to a certain extent focus on just one aspect of many, and I'm not so sure how much is convincing to me, because I didn't see that coming too much. I mean, that the reference of yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So that would be my first reaction to this final slide.
Yeah, can I say something to that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because that's a super valid point. I think that then what I didn't address sufficiently is that this integral product gives safety. So it sort of fends off many competitors. They are able to become the one and only, because it's very hard to enter as a new entrant, like Tesla. And there is some work also, earlier work conducted on integral products inviting Kaizen, so incremental improvements rather than kaikaku, because you're sort of path dependent. So maybe I should make that more explicit, that as they progress and they go further on this path of their hegemonic technology, it becomes harder for competitors to jump in and offer something that is of similar quality. But yeah, that extra step should be made more explicit. You're right.
Well, the floor is open, so we're not so many, but we are more than we started, as you see, Merieke. But
yeah, and Higashi-san was like me, was just completely inundated in architecture stories. So maybe it's too late for him, but we sat through the same classes that Professor Fujimoto was teaching. So maybe Higashi-san also has some observations to make on this.
Can I just raise a point? So I also do. So Merieke, first of all, thank you very much for sharing your work and Katharina's work. So very interesting. This is, of course, is not exactly my field of specialization. So, but at the same time, I also do, and I always did, applied research. So fieldwork, interview-based research. And so my, attention, I feel, is to understand all the time to what extent these are generalizable assumptions, to what extent these are context specific and findings that depend on the case you are analyzing. So, I mean, reflecting a bit more on this, I think to me is interesting. And in this regard, what are the factors that really determine that context matters? So is it only the company? Is it the type of design? Is it also the relationship between supplier and OEM? Because in this case, as Tommaso was saying, differently from other studies, you're analyzing a supplier. So how do all these other factors affect? I mean, this is not all for the scope of your own paper, but to talk also to others that might be analyzing a similar topic, but relating to different contexts and different companies, I think to me is always interesting to understand differences and common grounds, to talk to each other. And this also thinking of where you send your paper, who receives your paper. The other thing that I was, maybe that goes beyond your research, but in these types of learning that you highlight, to what extent, like what kind of institute, besides the firm-to-firm relationship, that of course is mainly your focus, but what are the institutional factors and the types of policy support that affect this type of learning? Because of course, these are firm-based studies, but firms don't exist in a vacuum. So what is the context, especially, I mean, if we consider companies that have bases in different countries, what are the context-related institutional factors that best facilitate or hamper these types of learning, this type of learning? Sorry, going beyond your presentation, but to put it in perspective.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, so, so the first question, how generalizable is this and what do you think is important? Based on the interviews, the most important thing seems to be everything starts with this being an integral product. I think that is key. And I think there's few studies that argue from product architecture and then to learning. Product architecture is often not discussed. Papers still get published where we don't even know what product a company is producing, and then we learn that creative leadership is great for output. And then I wonder if there is space for the argument that that product architecture impacts other processes, longitudinal processes in a company. If you see what we get back from the journals, then clearly there's no space for that argument. But if we look at how this company developed, how they structured, how they subsequently got path dependent on a different structure, it seems, and I can be biased, that this was because of the product being integral and having to deal with an OEM customer who is also producing an integral product. Yeah, the second question is a good one, because this is definitely a very international setting. And so one of the surprises that we had in one of the other studies is that we looked at the digital monitoring of a production process of a tier 2 metal stamper, as I mentioned before. Turns out that what the sensor is measuring in simply amount of products that is being produced, parts that's being produced, is almost double compared to what SAP is recording. And so you wonder what the heck is going on and where's half of this metal going? You know, it's sort of heavy, it's big, where's it going? Turns out that blue collar workers in this tier 2 supplier are paid based on the overall equipment efficiency. So if they're operating a machine and it's not efficient above a certain percentage, their salary gets cut. So they can't, buy school books. So what they did is that the workers were stealing faulty parts, bringing them back home to make sure that, so what a waste, what an incredible missed opportunity to improve a process. then gotta give it to the case company here is that they didn't penalize them for that, but au contraire, they gave them an innovation award for their willingness to adopt the monitoring sensor, because they know this is a problem, they know this is happening, and they need visibility into their supply chains where they know in Mexico this is happening. They can't change the payment structure at the supplier, so it does unearth a lot of topics that were completely unexpected. The company, the tier 2 themselves, then started installing metal detectors that the workers had to pass through when they went home. I mean, this is all the things that you then, if you cast a broad net, you find out, and you wonder, why do I need a digital tool for that if I had a good conversational relationship with these people at my production sites? So yeah, the institutional context definitely important. Another completely different example is that in the Netherlands, engineering is just no longer very fashionable amongst young students. And we don't educate the people who could be leading these processes. Germany is a little bit better, but also location in Germany is very unattractive to students. So one of the ways that they need to look at this is, how do I attract young talent? Diverse eyes that can look at these new requirements that our production processes will have. They don't want to sit in a gray industrial area in Stuttgart. They want to be in a central city area. So there's a lot of the institutional context is fascinating, and I'm happy to see that more and more research is paying attention to this, because it used to be completely invisible. So thanks for those two comments, Lorenza. Other things, I don't know if there's something in the chat, or was that about the recording? Yeah, that was about the recording. Any other questions? I don't even know what time it is. I'm talking.
It's 3 o'clock, so we still have time.
Oh, we still have time. Good.
No problem. So are there any other questions, remarks, suggestions, as you asked for the paper?
Yeah, is this just not interesting? This setting that could be like, this is just not something that people care about. You don't contribute to theory about absorptive capacity. That's driving the argument on product architecture. It just doesn't seem to resonate with everyone.
Can I say something? I find this very interesting because, but it's funny because I'm a sociologist of work on industrial relations. So the focus is different. And so I'm actually trying to put two pieces together that were made for different purposes, but this resonates with research that we're conducting actually with Tommaso at the moment, which is also a research on, from the point of view of engineers and managers on digital transformation of Renault. And I can say the firm here because there are only two French firms that manufacture vehicles in France. And it's interesting, how do you approach this idea of consolidation of existing knowledge and then the experimentation of a new design? And we also try to understand this, the technological transformation as a change that is not natural and comes necessarily from the exterior and also from above, in the sense that it is presented as a financial, if not economic, imperative for the firm in a very intense competition environment. But here the learning, the exploratory learning is in a certain way an imperative, constrained, because it is presented as a competitive advantage in a context in which the French firms are in a very bad position. So I completely, our research completely resonates with what you are trying to, say with your thing. But it is very interesting to try to approach this from different theoretical perspective or even disciplinary perspectives.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, so you say it's not a natural change, it's a change from above. there's a financial imperative for the firm. And the last thing about learning, I don't remember exactly, but this is sort of the answer to Lorenzo's questions about the institution. So that's definitely something to include. Nobody wants this. And also I think an important institutional setting is that this is an aging workforce. They're looking at the finish line. You know, it's 5 more years. Why on earth would they learn new skills? Or so one of the other projects I'm working on now with another PhD student is, how does skill transfer even work in this setting? If you can have 2 like digital leaders, as we had in this case, but how do they transfer their skills to other workers? And is this the same template as transferring traditional skills? So yeah, thanks. So could you repeat your 4th point? Because I just wrote down learning and then learning and competition, which now don't make sense anymore.
No, in the case of Renault that we're trying to study with Tommaso is that experimentation is I don't know how you would formulate it. It's a forced march towards experimentation. So they don't have the possibility to do otherwise. I don't know if this idea is clear. The experimentation with the new technological design, if I would put it in your words, is not a choice. It's an obligation from the perspective of the performance of the firm.
Yeah, and here there was a sense of urgency where they realized we're too late with our shift to electric. We have to put all our resources to this, so forget about internal combustion, with a few people saying, let's keep on holding on to that too for a little bit longer so we don't do away with all our skills. But yeah, the urgency, the sense of urgency and this sense of catching up prevented that from receiving the additional attention. So trying to do 2, like and with dexterity, trying to do the 2 things at the same time, that was very, that was something that they find hard to succeed in. Yeah, one other story that really baffled me is that they found a sensor that they could use for their automotive production. It was used in one of their home appliances. They couldn't transfer it internally. That process was too complex because the sensor was sitting in home appliances and the sensor was needed in automotive. This internal transfer was so difficult that the digital lead contracted his cleaning company to buy the sensor from the same company, home appliances, and he would buy it from the cleaning company. That was easier than doing the internal transfer. I mean, then you really wonder, the world is like upside down, right? This is very, very siloed. So cleaning company was, you know, buying cleaning material, brooms, whatever, buckets, and a very, very specific sensor, and then selling it back to the same company, but a different division.
Actually, this resonates a lot with what we see in Renault. This is like the bureaucratic hell of large organizations, in which people always all the time complain that they cannot do things, that is so complicated to do anything that stops innovation. And that leads me to a question: is what I actually saw in Renault, it was not like they were not the engineers. I mean, if I take the whole population, of course I didn't cover the whole population, but I got bits from different groups of engineers. So there were engineers who were working on new technologies, on electrifications and innovations, but often because we are talking about integral design company, these are marginal groups, so that they're not at the core of the process. And so my question would be, because that's why I was asking you before, who is speaking? And because when I look at my inquiry in Renault, I realized that is very important, because the organization is so vast, and also there is a matter of different communities of engineers. So typically in Renault, the engineers who take care of digitalizations arrived late, because Of course, in a car company, digitalization was not an important issue up to, let's say, the first things is 20 years ago, but so they start late and they're not powerful. And so there are marginal groups, despite they become important, but they don't have power, resources. These are built institutional inside the company. So they're still the old guys of the engineers of the cars, of the mechanical engineers, so all this type of power and resources, and it takes time to shift that. So a lot of people working with software, they were very frustrated in Renault, that they felt that they were never listened to, and so the resources were there, but it was also a matter of power relationship between different professional groups. And at the same time, with this transformation, I had the feeling that what is at stake and what explains also some irrational behavior is that it's just not only about technologies finding the right solution. Is a power struggle in terms of, hey guys, we are losing control. I mean, if we let what you said, if we let something from outside and whatever, so it's also a matter of keeping control of resources, of design. So in economic sociology, there is this notion that is being developed by Neil Flickstein that I like a lot, which is called conception of control. And basically, Flickstein says each company, each sector actually, but it comes from company, has a conception of control, which is a way of doing business and solving problems. And this comes from a professional groups. And when a professional groups develop a conception of control, which is a set of rules, implicit and explicit, that allows a leader of the sector to remain leader in time. And that also, so it's free, and comforts, support the power of the group which came up with this solution. And so a conception of control is very resilient. And it's basically what you're saying is this company is very reluctant to relinquish their conception of control, because it's what has allowed to stabilize their competitive environment, to give him power and whatever. And also because it's a specific professional group. So I would be interested more, I think it would be fascinating to understand if there is some power struggle inside the company, and not just only a matter, okay, we were not so good, now we need to change, we realized we were slow, but how these I believe that must be behind some power struggle between groups, and also if you had contradictory points of view, looking at different professional groups, because sometimes I heard this very negative view about how bad we are. It comes from people who are in charge of change, or managers with little technical knowledge, but they're in charge of reorganizing the company. And this is also what it comes from consultants that come to the company and says, you're bad, you're laggard, you need to change. So it's true, but at the same time, it's also a narrative that is used by people to establish their authority, to establish their role in the company. So that would be my right, because in your presentation, you focus on, you don't focus very much in putting context, who is talking and what, and also the configuration in which the power struggle might be changing, and what might be behind the direct reference, what we could read behind that in terms of what they're referring to. And I think it would be interesting, even if that will blur a little bit your message, to bring more contradictions, more like heterogeneity, suggesting that in the company there are different groups and different views and different communities. I was lacking a little bit of that in the presentation, I think, and it's there, I feel it, so that's why I was asking.
Yeah, thank you. So definitely that's there. I think the difference is that however successful they are, they're a supplier and they get orders. So probably less than Renault is this company able to set the dial on where the industry is going. They basically have big customers who stop ordering diesel. And then it's not so much a discussion on, should we be doing this? Should we be not doing this? No, nobody's ordering it. So I think they are in a more, the receiving end of some of the change. Clearly the customer is not requesting a digitized process, but they're requesting a digitized product. So I think the difference between the supplier and the car maker is that, you know, this is the order. They sit with the CEO of you know, one of the big car makers, and they said, we're going to stop ordering this, we're going to start ordering this. And then you just, yeah, you have to deal with that. So there's definitely tension, but the big narrative is less contested than I assume in Renault, but it's certainly something to look at. Yeah, again, I had to choose between knowing that you guys know which company this is and revealing some of the interviews I had where there's only one role in the company. There was a lot of support for the efforts. They rolled it out in a very dispersed way, which led to competing approaches to achieving the same goal, but most people trying to achieve the same goal. They were rewarding, as they always had been rewarding business unit for progress in company targets. Yeah, but definitely that's something where, you know, when there's tension, you can learn a lot. So that's definitely yeah. I will spend more time including that. Thank you.
Just another note, as you can see, Merieke, I mean, we are rather than giving you one answer, we are experts in this network to give you other inputs to open new windows. So you will we are probably going beyond the scope of what you had in mind. But so I was reflecting, since you stopped here on this slide, giving this comment, you don't contribute to theory about absorptive capacity. And what I was thinking of is, I mean, do you only want to contribute to these theories? I mean, every paper, each piece of applied work can lead you to many types of conclusions and contribute to different debates. Probably this is not the only debate or the only set of literature that you may contribute to. I think there are many other angles that you could derive from the same empirical material. I mean, we all relate to the same topic from different disciplinary perspectives, so we go in different directions, but this is a way to reflect about it. I think this question, connecting what you said and what the comment by Seb, I think this question of who determines innovation, I mean, who or what determines innovation, I mean, the idea that, I mean, we always think of innovation from a firm perspective as a market-based calculation, but there are like this idea of posing it as a forced reaction in a way or another to external factors, like it could be incentives, but an interesting case you provided is also labor intervention. So the workers that enact some behaviors and the company reacts to that, include like implementing some metal detectors or whatever. There are many actors that determine one type of innovation. So this is also an angle that is interesting. And looking at who determines innovation and learning, I think you should insist also on to what extent what Tommaso was saying at the beginning, to what extent this is valid because you are adopting a supplier perspective. So the location in the whole industry architecture, as opposed to other types of actors. So I think this is also a debate you could talk to very easily. And you can play with this empirical material, but I think you can, since you can derive different conclusions, you can also target other journals in innovation studies that are not necessarily what you targeted. Of course, it depends on your own publication needs, but I think you have a broad scope of conclusions you can derive, and therefore journals you can target.
Yeah, no, definitely. So we basically wanted to answer the question, why are they so slow to change? You know, if they're so skilled and so cutting edge, why are they so slow to change? And then, and that could be a bias. Intuitively, the answer lies for an interesting part in product architecture, which is not included in research on learning. So my mission was to include product architecture in theory on learning, absorptive capacity, in change, because it's very much overlooked, and it links back to me having to convince the editors-in-chief in Journal of Operations Management that if we want to study in depth social and climate sustainability, if you want to do this for mobility and transportation, that's different from doing it to fashion. So that's maybe that's a bit of a personal mission, that context plays an important role here, but maybe I should let go of that dream. Now, I mean, we didn't go everywhere with this paper, and the ASQ, of course, is a crazy place to start. But I found it very surprising to have a review that completely overlooks or decides to disregard the core arguments about the product architecture and a design shift and an industry setting. It surprised me. So that's and then when it surprises me, I want to find out why that is the case. Any other questions? I think this was the last. Yeah, there was. I at least have 7 pages.
I have a question.
Oh, great, John. Thank you. I don't see you though.
Yeah. So 2 questions really. The first is a simple one. When you talked about business units early on in the paper, are they products or countries or a mixture of the 2? And the second question is really about the shift to the new product architecture. I mean, that could be 2 things. It could be that it's a shift towards a product which incorporates more digital components, or it could be a product which is more modular, or 3 in fact, or it could be a new type of integral architecture component, but its novelty is the problem that is that is causing the difficulties in learning. So it's really a question of which combination of those differences is causing the learning problem.
Thank you. Yeah, so the business units were products. So they're definitely strictly structured according to products. And the shift was in propulsion technology. So whether or not so shifting from diesel and gasoline basically to a key focus on electric, whether that has more digital components, is more modular, or has a new type of architecture. We didn't discuss those technical sides in depth, except for one table. I mean, I would pull it up if you're interested in it, where we see they're somewhat more digital, they're somewhat more connected to other products, so less modular in a sense. But that was not the technical side of the product was not our focus. But the step before that, the ability to even make a shift to making something else. They weren't even successful in making something else. But that's definitely something to be more clear about, because that can be quite confusing if you're not familiar with that terminology. If you want to see what we did on that, please shoot me an email and I'm happy to share that part of the paper. I don't think that was pertinent to our argument, how the product architecture switched. Does that answer your question? Or I just see a name, so I don't know if you're looking very surprised or nodding in agreement.
I suppose I'm just thinking, well, had the company faced a change in the dominant design that was still purely requiring engineering competence, for example, whether it would have been easier for them to make the transition.
Yeah.
And so it's a question about which, what's the real problem here? And then if you imagine different situations, you can sort of think about when this learning thing is more likely to arise and when it's less likely to arise. Yeah,
that now I understand your question, Beth. That's a great question. I think even if the new product is just as integral, they would have faced the same problems because they just couldn't change at all. They couldn't learn new skills. They were very good at the skills they had. Doing something else was very difficult for them, especially if it wasn't invented here. Yeah, but thanks. That's definitely something to include. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Other questions, Chairman?
I agree with you on I mean, I think that you're right about your thesis, but if I looked at that and I was not, let's say I'm not convinced by that, I'm not 100% sure that the citation that you put would convince me. So I'm playing the devil's advocate and say, okay, if this was a company in not an integral architecture, the same type of company in a modular environment that is producing electronic components for a computer or software company, I agree with you that of course the culture would be very different in terms of how they feel confident about what they do, and perhaps the dominance of. So this point is very important, that the integral architecture contributes to their mindset, into their culture of engineering dominance and whatever. But there are stories of modular company, that the company in the electronic sector that have been completely wiped out by change in the dominant design, that have completely missed out opportunities in innovation, that have failed to, like IBM versus Microsoft, they didn't see that coming. So I agree. I believe that this argument, if I was a reviewer, I would perhaps want to have stronger evidence that this is really because it's an integral company, and that this is an integral design company. That is the issues, and there are not other issues that are related to what also Lorenza was saying: culture, the fact of being dominant player and incumbent for many years, not being. So this is linked to the architecture, but it could be also in more modular sector. You can find situations which are similar, and eventually the company will not be able to change in the same way. So just building on what we were saying, I mean, what you ask us to do, I'd say that I'm not sure whether I would be fully convinced, and perhaps I would suggest you to reinforce that it's really because. Then, of course, your presentation and your paper is two different things. And of course, I didn't read the paper, so perhaps everything is there in the paper. So I apologize if I just make redundant comments. But I have the feeling that you're definitely right. But perhaps there might be ways of pushing forward the message that yes, all the factors were there, and perhaps acknowledge them as being important. But at the core of that, the integral design plays a crucial role because. These and these and these. So perhaps that would help to push forward the message that has been completely missed by your reviewers, apparently. But again, perhaps in your paper, everything is there. So just the final thinking that I had. Yeah.
No, and that links to the question that you asked before. No, absolutely. I mean, but if you're saying you're definitely right, you just have to show it already. I feel much better than saying you're definitely wrong and your paper didn't show it. So no, clear. That's I mean, all these points are very well taken. It's a bit convoluted. There's a lot of moving targets, and sometimes you're actually hampered by an intuition you have if you try to do case research. So no, that's definitely all very great and good points. Also, John's point just now about does it even matter it's linked to what you say, doesn't even matter if they switch from an integral to another integral product, or if they would switch from an integral to another modular product. So that's plenty of things to dissect. Maybe by the end I have 3 papers on each of these, so that's even better. No, good, thanks a lot.
Okay, is there any final comments? And before we close this, I think it was a very interesting case studies, and it's really not often we talk about these big supplier companies. It's like we really know very little about them, and this has been always a big lack of research, in particular because many times we've seen research on suppliers, but you go on suppliers like a general category of different companies. So what do the suppliers do? What are the problems? What are the issues and whatever? But we don't, despite the fact that we have these mega suppliers that have emerged as leading companies that have key role in the supply chain. It's true that we do lack, at least in Georpisa, studies. I mean, we haven't seen many studies on these companies, which are similar to OEMs because they're big, because they're powerful, because they have this confidence. But they're also different because they're suppliers and they don't sell products to the market. So I think it's a very interesting case study. And the fact that you have all the students working in the same company, I think that's very, very, very good.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So, it has been my also my mission, especially the smaller firms. But then I realized I need to talk to these bigger firms as well. Also, I mean, this company is vastly more profitable than any of the car makers all of us been studying, and also they say no to customers too. That's, I think it's another topic to be explored. This company can say no to an OEM who then subsequently doesn't have a technology that's coveted by the customer, and the competitor does come out with it. So there's been cases like that, and they don't distinguish between OEMs from the same country or not. So they have an interesting position. So I'll gladly contribute my small piece to that part of the big automotive production, the vast automotive production base.
Okay. Well, I think we can thank Merieke for this great presentation and great discussion we had. Looking forward to see you in Brussels.
Yes.
Let me remind everyone that the call for the conference is open, and you can see we have beginning to receive some papers, some paper proposals. So everyone is invited to send a paper, which will be the occasion to meet and discuss different contributions. And
we will also meet, of course, in Paris. We have discussed about that in person very soon in March for our big day. That will be on like 6 presentations from young researchers. That will be a morning and afternoon, and we will provide Zoom links to that too. So there will be 5 presentations because we have one has dropped during. We found a replacement. Well, we look for a replacement. Anyway, that will be a very rich day. I know that will be difficult for some of our international audience to be there all the time via Zoom, but I hope we see some of you there as well. So see you all very soon, and thank you again for being with us, and thank you, Merieke.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care and see you soon.
Thanks. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.